Joyce was not like other girls her age. She was quiet, reserved, and always kept to herself. People in school called her the silent one because she hardly spoke unless necessary. She had no close friends, no boyfriend, and no one really knew what went on in her life. But everything changed one evening. It was raining heavily, the kind of rain that made people run for cover. Joyce had gone out for a short walk, something she rarely did, when she saw something that made her stop. A white dog lay by the roadside, soaked from head to toe, shivering from the cold. Its big, sad eyes looked up at her, almost like it was pleading for help. Joyce never liked dogs. In fact, she was scared of them. But something about this one made her feel different. She felt pity. She bent down, hesitated for a moment, then touched its wet fur. "You poor thing," she whispered. The dog wagged its tail weakly. Joyce sighed. She couldn't just leave it there to die. She looked around, then lifted the dog gently in her arms and carried it home. She named him Jason. From that day on, Joyce and Jason became inseparable. At first, she only wanted to help him until he got better. But Jason was no ordinary dog. He was smart, too smart. He followed her everywhere, sat by her feet when she studied, and even growled at strangers who got too close. Whenever Joyce was sad, Jason would rest his head on her lap, as if he understood her pain. Whenever she was happy, Jason wagged his tail excitedly, sharing in her joy. She felt something strange, something she had never felt for anyone before. Jason was not just a pet. He was her protector, her companion, her everything. As the months passed, something about Jason started to change. He became overprotective, too possessive. He didn't allow anyone near Joyce. Whenever her female friends visited, he would growl until they left. When male classmates came over to study, he attacked them, barking furiously and chasing them away. At first, Joyce found it funny, but soon it became disturbing. Her best friend, Anita, was the only one bold enough to speak up. One afternoon after class, Anita pulled her aside. "Joyce, we need to talk," she said in a serious tone. Joyce frowned. "What is it?" Anita hesitated, then sighed. "People are talking. They say you're too close to Jason. It's not normal." Joyce felt her heart skip a beat. "What do you mean?" Anita lowered her voice. "They say you're hiding something, that Jason is not just a dog to you. Joyce, I'm worried. You don't even have human friends anymore. It's like Jason controls you." Joyce laughed nervously. "That's ridiculous." But deep down, she knew Anita was right. Jason had taken over her life, and she didn't even know how it happened. It wasn't just her friends who noticed. Her parents came to visit one weekend. They hadn't seen her in months and were excited to spend time with their daughter. But when they arrived, something felt off. Jason was sitting in the living room, staring at them with cold, dark eyes. "Joyce, is that the dog you told us about?" her mother asked. "Yes, Mom. His name is Jason." Her father frowned. "He's too big, too strange." Jason growled. Her mother shivered. "Joyce, why are you so attached to this animal? You don't go out. You don't talk to people. It's not healthy." Jason let out a low, menacing bark. Her father stood up. "You need to get rid of him." That was the last straw for Jason. He leaped off the couch and barked furiously, chasing Joyce's parents out of the house. Joyce stood frozen, watching her own parents run away in fear. And the scariest part? She wasn't angry at Jason. She was relieved. That night, Joyce lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. She knew Jason was not a normal dog. She knew what they had was not normal. But the thought of losing him scared her. No man would ever satisfy her like Jason. No man would ever protect her the way he did. She belonged to Jason, but how long could she keep him? One afternoon, a male classmate, David, came over to study. He had heard the rumors but didn't believe them. He thought Joyce was just lonely, that she needed a friend, but the moment he stepped into the house, Jason attacked. He barked, growled, and jumped at David, forcing him to run for his life. "Joyce, this is crazy!" David shouted from outside. "He's controlling you." But Joyce didn't respond. She simply watched from the window as Jason sat beside her, wagging his tail. Her parents had had enough. They forced her to transfer to a new school in the United States. Joyce was devastated. She couldn't take Jason with her. She cried for days, but her parents didn't change their decision. The night before her flight, she sat on the floor, hugging Jason tightly. "How will I live without you?" she whispered. Jason licked her face, his eyes filled with something dark, something possessive. The next morning, she packed her bags and went to take her bath before heading to the airport. But as soon as she entered the bathroom, Jason did something shocking. He jumped on the table and destroyed her passport. By the time Joyce came out, it was too late. The passport was shredded beyond repair. She was stuck. And the strangest part, she wasn't sad. She was happy. She would never leave Jason, ever. After the passport incident, Joyce's parents were furious. "You did this on purpose, didn't you?" her father shouted. "No, Dad. I swear I don't know how it happened." Joyce lied. Her mother sighed. "Fine, but you're not staying here alone anymore. We're finding you a better school here, and you're moving back home with us." Joyce felt her heart race. That meant staying away from Jason. But she couldn't argue. A week later, she started attending a new university. Her parents hoped she would make human friends and forget about Jason. They even banned her from bringing him to the house. Joyce felt empty without Jason. But then, something unexpected happened. She met Jeffrey. Jeffrey was everything a girl could ask for. Handsome, smart, gentle, and the best part, he liked her. Joyce had never been in a real relationship before. No man had ever caught her interest. But Jeffrey was different. He made her laugh. He walked her to class. He listened when she spoke. For the first time in a long time, she felt like a normal girl. Maybe she didn't need Jason after all. Maybe she could finally move on. But Jason had other plans. One afternoon, Joyce went to visit Jason in secret. She found him sitting in front of the house, staring at her with those deep, knowing eyes. She bent down and hugged him. "I missed you." Jason didn't wag his tail. Instead, he just stared. Joyce sighed. "Jason, I met someone." Jason's ears twitched. "He's nice. I think I like him." Jason let out a low growl. Joyce ignored it. "You'll like him too, I promise." Jason growled louder. Then suddenly he bit her hand. Not hard enough to bleed, but enough to send a warning. Joyce gasped and pulled away. "Jason!" Jason stared at her, his message clear. "No man will take you from me." Despite Jason's warning, Joyce and Jeffrey grew closer. Within 6 months, he proposed. Joyce was shocked. "Marry me, Joyce," Jeffrey said, holding out a ring. "I love you." Joyce should have been happy. But instead, she felt fear. Not because she didn't love Jeffrey, but because she knew Jason wouldn't allow it. Still, she forced a smile and nodded. Yes. Her parents were overjoyed. They threw a big engagement party and invited all their friends. Everyone was happy, everyone except Jason. That night, Joyce went to see Jason again. She bent down and whispered, "I'm getting married." Jason snarled. She touched his fur gently. "Please don't be mad." Jason let out a deep, dangerous growl. Then he disappeared into the darkness. Joyce felt a chill run down her spine. Something was wrong, and she was about to find out why. 3 days later, Jeffrey was found unconscious in his apartment. His body was covered in deep claw marks. Doctors said it was an animal attack. But Joyce knew the truth. Jason did it. She had seen those marks before. She had felt those claws on her skin. Jason was warning her. She belonged to him, and no one else. Joyce couldn't leave Jason alone in her apartment. She knew it was a bad idea, but she convinced Jeffrey to let Jason move in with them. At first, Jeffrey agreed, but he had one condition. That dog stays outside. Joyce nodded. Of course. But deep down, she knew she would never treat Jason like an ordinary dog. Days passed. Jeffrey started noticing strange things. Joyce spent more time with Jason than with him. At night, when Jeffrey wanted to cuddle, Joyce would get up and go check on Jason. Whenever Jeffrey tried to touch her, Jason would growl. One evening, Jeffrey entered the bedroom and saw Joyce sleeping on the floor next to Jason instead of in bed with him. His patience snapped. "Joyce, this is getting out of hand," Jeffrey shouted. Joyce rubbed her eyes sleepily. "What do you mean? You're supposed to be my fiancé, not Jason's." Jeffrey exploded. "You treat that dog like he's your husband." Jason lifted his head and stared at Jeffrey. Something about the way he looked at him sent a chill down Jeffrey's spine. But he ignored it. "I won't marry a woman who chooses a dog over me," Jeffrey said. "Either Jason leaves this house, or you do." Joyce's heart pounded. She looked at Jason. Then she looked at Jeffrey. And for the first time, she couldn't decide. That night, Joyce packed her bags. She didn't argue. She didn't beg. She just picked up Jason's leash, looked at Jeffrey one last time, and walked out. Jeffrey sighed in relief, but as Joyce stepped out the door, she heard a deep growl. She turned and saw Jason, his eyes glowing. It was the first time she had ever seen them like that. Dark, cold, almost human. And then Jason smirked. Joyce's breath caught in her throat. Dogs don't smirk. Jason was no ordinary dog. And Jeffrey had just made a big mistake. The moment Joyce walked in, her mother's angry voice filled the room. "Joyce, what is wrong with you?" she shouted. "How can you leave your fiancé because of a dog?" Joyce sighed, dropping her bags. She was tired of this conversation. "Mom, please, let's not do this now," she mumbled. Her mother ignored her and pointed at Jason, who sat quietly in the corner. "There is no way," her mother said firmly, "that I will allow you and this dog to stay under the same roof alone." Joyce stiffened. "What do you mean?" she asked, her heart pounding. "I'm bringing your cousin Linda to stay with you," her mother said. "She will keep an eye on you." Joyce's stomach tightened. She didn't want Linda here. She didn't want anyone watching her. But her mother had made up her mind. 2 days later, Linda arrived. She was cheerful and full of life. "Joyce, I've missed you," she said, hugging her tightly. Joyce forced a smile. "I missed you too." Linda's eyes landed on Jason. "Wow, so this is the famous Jason?" She laughed. "Your mom talks about him like he's your husband." Jason just stared. Linda frowned. "He's so quiet?" "He's just protective," Joyce said quickly. But deep down, she felt uneasy. She could tell that Jason didn't like Linda, and she had a feeling something bad was going to happen. At first, everything seemed normal. Linda settled in, and they spent the evening talking. But as the night grew darker, something changed. Linda began to feel like someone was watching her. She glanced at Jason. He was sitting in the corner, still, silent, staring. His eyes followed her every move. She shivered. "Joyce, I think Jason doesn't like me," she whispered. Joyce chuckled nervously. "He's just protective." Linda wasn't convinced. Something about Jason felt wrong. At 2 a.m., Linda woke up thirsty. She got out of bed and walked toward the kitchen. The apartment was silent, but then